Welcome to the weekly podcast with writer, blogger, activist, Reverend Marie Duquette. You can find out more about her on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn as Marie Duquette. And don't forget to subscribe to her blog, Take Off Your Shoes.
The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 17th chapter. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
When I first met Deb, my partner, a.k.a. Sass, down in Florida, she told me about a vision she had during centering prayer. For those who don't know, centering prayer is a form of prayer in which you sit in total silence and just listen. You could sit for anywhere from 20 minutes to a week, and people do. This is part of her practice as a spiritual director. In case you didn't know, she's quite a mystical wench. Thank you, Steve. So she told me she had this vision. And at the time I was serving in a brand new call in Florida with Pastor Dave, my longtime friend and mentor, and Sister Michelle, a minister of word and service and a deaconess in the ELCA. And she said, in this vision, Pastor Dave was at the base of this mountain, like gathering people who were all around the base of the mountain, kind of pushing them towards starting the climb. Sister Michelle was about halfway up the mountain, walking with people, making sure this one held onto the rope, counting heads, and moving actually with the people. But you were on top of the mountain going, "Come on, you guys, look up here!" And I never forgot that, because I remember then thinking, what does this mean? And I've wrestled with it ever since. In all 3 versions of the Transfiguration story, the disciples who are with Jesus see Moses and Elijah, who are dead. But they appear alive, dazzling, as it were. This one that we heard today, this version from Matthew, was written in about 80 AD. When communities of faith from various synagogues were in conflict about the full identity of Jesus and what that meant for them according to Jewish law, they were arguing about which community of faith, divided by synagogue, was the most righteous, had the truth, were right. Members of the community were in tension regarding the degree to which the church should require the growing body of Gentile converts to adopt Jewish practices. There was also tension regarding how do they relate to the Roman Empire. There's an old hymn that says there were fightings and fears within and without. That's interesting. All three versions, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, of the Transfiguration, in all three, Jesus prophesies about his suffering. He's leading his followers to the realm of God, on earth as it is in heaven. And much of the world was doing everything possible to resist the realm of God. Jesus was letting his disciples know that his suffering would become their own if they continued to follow him. Being a follower of Jesus was never designed to be easy. When Matthew wrote this gospel, get this, some of Jesus' followers were beginning to lose confidence that the realm of God was coming at all and starting to drift away. Go figure. The Transfiguration is a story of blessed assurance. The executive committee of the disciples are all there to witness it. James, Peter, and John. God reveals Jesus in the body he will have in the resurrection, a glimpse of what is yet to come. Matthew wants the church to believe that participation in the realm of God is worth suffering the fractiousness they are experiencing with the synagogue down the street and within their own community. Matthew reinforces this theme through the words, listen to him. That is, pay attention to what Jesus has just told you. Jesus remains faithful even when rejected. And God resurrected him and will return him. If you endure, God will be similarly faithful to you. You will be resurrected and will be part of the new world. The Transfiguration is not just a story of that moment, that experience that's covered in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's also about the church, a season of struggle within the church and within the culture. Our encounter with Jesus should leave the church a transfigured community, present in the old age but shining with the light of the new, of what is yet to come. In church, we are transfigured, transformed, and changed. In all three of the versions of this story, Jesus takes on this ethereal glow. It's both shining and more transparent. In all three versions, this cloud overshadows the executive committee. The disciples are afraid. In all three, God's voice reminds them that Jesus is God's Son and urges them to listen to him. And in all three, Peter the Impulsive suggests he build 3 sukkahs, yurts, tents, so that they can stay on the mountain. And in all three, instead of taking Peter up on his offer, Jesus leads the disciples back down the mountain to face the very things they fear. The Roman Empire, the conflicts inside and outside of their synagogues, Jesus' suffering, death, and resurrection, though at this point, the suffering and death seriously overshadow the resurrection. It's not too difficult to see the parallels to our lives today, is it? Suffering, death all around us overshadow our thoughts of resurrection. Believers have drifted away and continue to do so. They always have, they always will. We know we must listen to Jesus to stay the course, and we often forget to do so. We have had moments of transparency, joy, celebration, things we consider mountaintop events, but holding on to those things is elusive. All too quickly, we seem to find ourselves headed down the mountain again to face conflict within and without the church, our homes, and the world. Our lives in 2023, in many ways, are drastically different than those of Jesus' original disciples, and yet in some key ways, we are all living the same story on endless loop. We, like Peter, would just as soon stay on the mountain. In fact, if this were our literal story today, we have more than enough experienced hikers, gifted craftsmen, and eternally resourceful people to build the structures. The structures that Peter suggested, so we'd never have to descend the mountain and return to the things that bring about fear in our everyday lives. I mean, take a look around. Much of the art and furniture in this building was created by artists and carpenters in our midst. To some extent, you might even say that our church is the mountaintop. It's here that we witness change and transformation and transfiguration. It's even shaped kind of like a mountain. Many churches are. It's here that we've built separate dwellings, offices, classrooms, a place for larger celebrations and meals. It is here that the good news in the gospel has brought us to tears, and it is here that in the midst of trauma we have cried. It's here that we have laughed and sung and shared meals together. It's here that we have reminisced about the days of old, and sometimes brought back to life through biblical dramas, heroes like Moses, Elijah, the disciples, and even Jesus. Heck, it's even here that individuals in the tradition of Peter have made wild suggestions that have been totally ignored. It's no wonder that when we were able to begin gathering here last spring, we did so despite the fact that we were not completely sure it was safe to do so, and that we were out of practice of how to be together as the community Jesus calls us to be. It is ironic how much faith communities joke about disliking change, right down to the tired jokes about changing light bulbs, because in fact, being part of a faithful community such as this one does in fact change you no matter how hard you resist. I mean, let's start with the chairs. I've lost track of how many times we have changed the configuration of the chairs, although moving the chairs has been downright therapeutic for me and Sass, because we routinely work out our frustrations by moving furniture. We've seen Holy Communion go from our holiest moment in worship to a virtual version to individual Lunchables we consumed from our seats, trying not to grimace, and back now to something that is not as majestic as it was pre-pandemic, but that we are grateful to have because it represents how we are healing. Is it any wonder that in all three versions of the gospel, Peter says the quiet part aloud? It is good to be here. It's good to be here because it is here we remember together that Jesus, God's Son, the beloved, once walked the earth, was crucified, died, and was buried, and on the third day was resurrected from the dead, the single unique event in the history of the world. It is here we are reminded that no matter how much conflict and suffering we experience when we go out these doors and leave this mountain, that Jesus leads the way and stays with us in a form we can neither fully grasp nor deny. It's here that we yearn to be when the events that overshadow our lives, when we are off the mountain, terrify us. Peter, James, and John only got to be on the mountain and see God's glory in Jesus in this memorable way one time. How blessed are we to see it happen over and over again. And yet God is clear in what we are to do once we have been to the mountain. We must return to the community in which we live off the mountain and follow Jesus there. We cannot stay on the mountain, but we can do one thing that will help us live in the conflict and chaos when we leave this sacred space. We can listen to God's beloved Son. We can listen to him. And when we do this one thing, listening to Jesus, it's amazing that the things that frighten us kind of lose their grip. They're still there, but when we focus on listening to Jesus and doing what Jesus tells us to do, we often find mini mountain experiences even when we're at the base and in the surrounding villages. Mini mountain experiences when we're feeding the poor. Many mountain experiences when we stand in solidarity with the oppressed. Many mountain experiences when we choose forgiveness over grudge, when we choose love over hate, when we choose action over apathy. I'll be honest. You have heard me preach for 7 years now about getting outside these walls. But as I prepare to leave this mountain for the last time, I don't want to leave either. It's scary out there. It has been good to be here, where in the last 52 years you have gathered to walk one of your beloved home at the occasion of 78 funerals. Here, where 191 youth have opted to confirm their faith in a witness that was both poignant and comical. Here, where 163 marriages took place, and in the last 7, 2 of those marriages were with same-sex partners because you believe and affirm that love is love. Here, where 301 people have been baptized, most, though not all of them, babies. So fresh from God, it is a gift unto itself that they love us, even from the very start. Here, the church is a special place. It is filled with people who are simultaneously saints and sinners. And just because the world imposes upon us that we should drop the sinner part, it is here, by the grace of God, that we practice the long, hard work of doing that. And we never quite get there in this world. Bob Dylan had a song. And this song was always kind of the way I envisioned God when I came to a new church of the 4 that I have served. In the song, it's about a woman, I suppose, who says, "Come in. Come in," she said. "I'll give you shelter from the storm." It has been good to be here. And yet the primary purpose of coming here is to be formed to go out there. In all 3 gospel accounts of Jesus' transfiguration, if you keep reading, once the disciples and Jesus descend the mountain, the very next thing that happens is that Jesus heals a child with a demon. This is what helps me, and maybe it will help you to continue to live beyond the glory of this mountain. There are plenty of demons that plague us today. Poverty, illness, injustices of all stripes. And Jesus is busy with those who follow him off the mountain. He's busy healing those things that plague God's beloved children. One situation, sometimes one child at a time. And I wouldn't want to be absent from any of that, would you? Because as beautiful as this mountain may be, as safe as we might feel here, it's witnessing God's work in the world that is the real mountaintop experience. That's what gives us hope that's not born of a story for which we were not actually present, but hope born of stories we are blessed to witness and sometimes participate in every single day. Stories of hope. It has been my privilege to walk with you up and down this mountain. It will remain my privilege to meet you at the base camp from time to time, as together we continue to listen to Jesus, to follow him. It will be my joy to meet you again when we return to the dust from which God made us and are resurrected to life everlasting. And between now and then, know this: you will be fine. I will be fine. Because we do not walk through this world alone. We are guided by God's own Spirit. We are guided by the words and actions of Jesus. We are guided by God Almighty, creator of the valleys and the mountains, the shepherd who guides us through the valley of the shadow of death, the Alpha and Omega who promises we will be reunited with those who have gone before us, like Moses and Elijah, in that place where pain and suffering are no more. Martin Luther King's last sermon was called "I've Been to the Mountain." The very next day he gave that sermon, he was assassinated. But in this month of African American history, and in this particular sermon, I look for the day when I meet him face to face and tell him that I quoted him in my final sermon as a pastor, reminding the people, I have been to the mountain. I have been to the mountain. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Thank you for listening. This is Deborah Bohn, producer, editor, and partner of Marie Duquette. If you're still listening, smash the subscribe button and click the bell to know when the next podcast is dropped. If you'd like, drop something in the comments. Follow Marie on her blog at marinawell.com. That's marinawell.com. Peace out.